Janelle with Waypoint Realty here on another market update. I cannot believe we're already past halfway through this year and we still haven't seen any slowdown or changes in market prices as far as going down for buyers. Now, some good news for buyers is that according to Jerome Powell, who is the chairman of the Federal Reserve, interest rates will not change this year and they're not going to change in 2022. However, we are going to see 2 hikes in 2023 and 2 more interest rate hikes in 2024. Now, this year and next year are going to be a great time to make a purchase. Federal Reserve now foresees the first rate hikes in 2023 across the board, so that obviously affects the housing market as well. Now, one of the biggest issues we've seen, which I continue to talk about, is inventory issues, the lack of inventory. While we did see a few more houses on the market in June and July, it's nothing compared to the amount of buyers that are looking to purchase a home. Now, inventory has also been in a slump because development of new construction has been slowed tremendously due to the cost of construction and the cost of land. Now, lumber, you guys who have tried to do DIY projects or even tried to build your own home in the last year and realized that the quote that you initially received and when you were ready to start construction was not even close to the same, it's because lumber went up 275%. Wow, that's insane. Now, in May, it did go down 40%, but it's still incredibly high. So it's still very restrictive for a lot of projects that are underway or were planning to be underway. So we're not going to see that trickle effect in our housing market for several months, possibly until next year, but it's a good start, the fact that it's stabilizing the cost of construction. Now, the not so great news is that there's private equity firms like BlackRock, which are spending billions to buy property and become one of the largest landlords. It's incredibly scary, especially because half the country's properties are owned by institutional investors. Now, we always like to give our homeowners and families a chance to purchase because investors are constantly coming up with cash offers and outbidding many would-be homeowners. So it's incredibly challenging for homeowners to try to compete with these big billion-dollar investment funds. Now, a few days ago, the next 2 years are going to be a great time for buyers to try to take advantage of these low interest rates, that's for sure. The whole thing is you got to get your foot in the door, get a good aggressive offer as much as you can, and make sure that you are constantly communicating with the listing agent to get your foot in the door to even get your offer reviewed. What you would like is obviously for it to get accepted. Now, a few days ago, a CNBC article, it was mentioned and quoted that the CEO of Taylor Morrison, she thinks that the housing shortage that began before the pandemic will stick around for a long time as market demand continues to soar. As I mentioned before, new construction has slowed down, so it's going to be very difficult for builders to make up the shortage of what's been happening, the deficit that's literally been building up for more than a decade now. In Oviedo, I went to 4 new communities and they were all but sold out. There was one that had 5 lots left, had not been released, and they had over 24 buyers that had already been pre-approved in waiting. And the way that they were doing it was, as they would release one lot, first person to respond to the email that said they would want it was the first one that would get it. I mean, that is where we're at with homes, that people are spending up over $500,000 in these new communities and not getting any options for any upgrades, no design center, no nothing. It's exactly what the builder has put out because they don't want to delay construction. So they're literally paying over $500,000 for a house that they can't customize until after they close on their own dime. It's a very different market for new construction, and I feel that there's going to be a lot of buyer's remorse in the next 1 to 4 years on people who purchase the new construction out of desperation rather than really trying to find the house that they love. It's where we're at right now. So even though interest rates will increase, the overwhelming demand and lack of supply unfortunately is going to be with us for years to come. We've been seeing this decline in inventory since after 2008 really, but in 2012 there was just no sign of it increasing anywhere. Now, the Mortgage Bankers Association seasonally adjusted index, they showed that the mortgage demand decreased for the second week in a row, dropping by 1.8% to their lowest level since the beginning of 2020. Home purchase applications and mortgage applications to refinance a home both dropped for the week, even though mortgage rates dipped. Now, refinancing has had penalties, so many people they were weighing out to see if it was even worth it, if it was an option, especially many who had refinanced when it had already dropped to the 4s, which is still incredible. So maybe they didn't want to refi to 2.75 because the penalty of getting hit with that extra percentage just wasn't worth it. So I think that's why we saw a decrease in refinances, and new purchase applications are low because there's just no inventory, and there's a lot of cash buyers that don't need to submit mortgage applications. Now, the growth in housing inventory has slowed over the past decade in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, creating an underbuilding gap of 5.5 million to 6.8 million housing units across the country. It's a gap. There is literally not enough housing across the country, and that's been since 2001, according to a recent report from the National Association of Realtors. Now, right now, we need new inventory. We just need inventory. People either love where they live, or if they don't want to sell because they have nowhere to go because everything is just so expensive right now. New construction is where we need to see some resolve, but it has to start sprawling outside of the cities that people actually want to live in, because the cost of land and space, it's just very challenging. Home prices have risen sharply during the coronavirus pandemic, which we've all experienced. Now, it's been across the US, but especially Orlando, where we moved up to becoming one of the more expensive cities per median income, where we used to be one of the most affordable ones to live, which is also why I think we had a lot of people relocating to Orlando, which also didn't help drive up the prices with the mix of the pandemic and decreasing inventory and prices going up and construction costs. So I think all of this was what really has affected Central Florida and hit us really hard. Now, the hike has sparked affordability concerns, especially, as I've said, for first-time home buyers being priced out time after time after time. FHA is one of the most difficult loans to get approved right now for financing. It's a challenge. I implore you, if you guys can get your credit score up, or if you guys can try to get conventional financing, you're gonna have a much higher leg up to actually get approved for a property. So I really would encourage you to try to transition from FHA to conventional if possible. We have clients that were taking their time looking for a home in the last 2 years. They just finally settled on a home. And 2 years later, their budget had to increase about $200,000, just to give you an idea of what is going on in this market. And we've seen that time and time again from people who were waiting and just waiting to find the right one, and now they did, but they had to go get pre-approved for a much higher rate than they were when they first started. That's what we've seen. And if you see something that you can afford now, don't hesitate, because when interest rates go up, it's going to end up costing you way more anyways, and there's no guarantee that the prices are going to be going down until we get more inventory pumped into the market, which there's no plan in sight to keep up with the demand. If you guys have any market questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me anytime, waypointrealty.com.